The message notification blinked on my phone screen, a small, insistent square of light against the dim Portland evening. Caleb. My stomach did a little flip. The good kind, mostly. We'd been seeing each other for 6 months, and it felt real, solid. Different from the fleeting, anxious connections I'd grown used to. He was kind, steady, patient. Everything I hadn't realized I was desperately searching for. We had a date planned for tonight, dinner at that new Italian place downtown, the one with the string lights and the tiny, overpriced pasta. I picked up the phone, a smile already forming. Then I saw the text. So sorry, Maya. Ran into a huge issue at the office. Looks like I'm stuck here for a while. Can we reschedule? So bummed. Rain check soon? My smile evaporated, just like that. Poof. Replaced by a cold, heavy stone in my gut. Stuck at the office. A huge issue. A brief, hurried text. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Okay, no problem. That was the easy, expected response. The one that didn't make waves, didn't reveal the sudden, sharp stab of disappointment that felt suspiciously like something else. Something darker. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a familiar, icy dread, whispering, "See? He doesn't really care. You're not a priority. Something else is always more important." It was the voice I'd carried inside me for as long as I could remember. The one that sounded suspiciously like my mother's, even when she wasn't speaking. "You're too much, Maya. Too sensitive. Too not quite right." "Okay, no problem," I typed, forcing a cheerful exclamation point. Sent. My apartment felt too quiet now. The carefully chosen outfit for dinner suddenly felt ridiculous. I walked over to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked streets below. The lights of the city blurred into streaks of colour. Portland in the rain. Usually it felt cozy, atmospheric. Tonight it felt isolating. I knew, logically, that work emergencies happened. Caleb was a software engineer, and sometimes things broke at inconvenient times. He wasn't ditching me. He wasn't being malicious. But logic had very little sway over the knot tightening in my chest. It felt like a test I had failed without even knowing the rules, a confirmation of that deep-seated fear that I was fundamentally replaceable, easily set aside. Liam would tell me I was overthinking. My friend Liam, who had seen me through various degrees of emotional chaos over the years, always had a calm, grounded perspective. He'd probably tell me to order some takeout, put on a comfort movie, and talk about it later. He wouldn't judge the intensity of my reaction, not out loud anyway. He knew some of the history, enough to understand that my emotional thermostat was calibrated differently, set to react to perceived rejection with the force of a Category 5 hurricane, even if the trigger was just a cancelled dinner. I paced my small living room. The feeling wasn't fading. It was morphing into a quiet resentment. Why couldn't he have called? A text felt so dismissive, so easy, like ripping off a Band-Aid without warning. Was I being unreasonable? Probably. That was another familiar feeling. The constant questioning of my own reactions. Was this a normal amount of upset, or was it the too much my mother always warned me about? My phone buzzed again. Caleb. Really am sorry. Make it up to you big time. Are you free Saturday? Saturday. A concrete plan. The stone in my gut eased slightly. See? He was making an effort. He was trying to reschedule. The negative voice quieted, but it didn't disappear. It just retreated to the shadows, waiting. I typed back, "Saturday works. Hope the work thing gets sorted. Don't stress too much." Added a heart emoji. The performance of being easygoing. It was exhausting. I ordered Thai food, the spicier the better, hoping the heat would distract me. Sat on my couch, scrolling mindlessly, trying to shake the lingering unease. It wasn't just tonight. It was the way I felt, constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for Caleb or anyone I cared about to reveal that they didn't actually like me, didn't actually want me around, that they were just tolerating me until something better came along. This wasn't fair to Caleb. He was kind. He was consistent. He hadn't done anything to earn this level of suspicion. This was baggage. Heavy, cumbersome baggage that I was dragging into what felt like the first potentially healthy relationship I'd ever had. I needed to talk to someone about it. Not just vent to Liam, but really unpack it. The thought of therapy had been circling my mind for months, maybe years. The idea felt daunting, overwhelming. Like opening a Pandora's box of everything I'd spent my entire adult life trying to keep locked away. But the alternative, continuing to live like this, constantly bracing for impact, ruining potentially good things because I was so convinced they would inevitably turn bad, felt even more daunting, more suffocating. Maybe it was time to face the ghosts in the room, the ones that whispered my mother's criticisms every time someone cancelled a plan or said something that could be remotely interpreted as a slight, the ones that told me I had to be perfect, agreeable, and small, or I risked being completely discarded. The decision felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. I spent the next day researching therapists in Portland, specifically those who worked with trauma and attachment issues. The jargon was dense, but the core message resonated. Past experiences shape present relationships. It felt like a validation of the chaos I felt inside. It wasn't just me being too sensitive. It was a learned response, a defense mechanism built over years of needing to be constantly vigilant. Finding the right therapist felt like another hurdle. Profiles online were clinical, impersonal. How do you choose the person you're going to spill your deepest fears to? I finally settled on one, Dr. Ramirez, whose photo had a kind smile and whose bio mentioned a focus on building resilience. I sent an email, my finger hovering over the send button for a full minute before finally clicking. It felt like stepping off a cliff. A few days later, I was sitting in her office, a quiet, calm space in a building in the Alphabet District. The rain was still falling outside, a soft drumming against the window panes. Dr. Ramirez had a gentle presence, her office filled with plants and soft lighting. It wasn't intimidating. That helped. "So, Maya," she began, her voice calm and steady, "you mentioned in your email you wanted to explore some patterns in your relationships and how past family experiences might be impacting them." I nodded, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Where to even start? The cancelled date with Caleb felt too small, too silly, as the catalyst for this. But it was the most recent trigger. I'm seeing someone," I began, my voice quiet. "Caleb, he's really great and things are good. But sometimes something small happens. Like he has to cancel a date and I just spiral. I feel like he doesn't care, even though I know that's not true. It feels like a huge rejection, disproportionate to what actually happened." Dr. Ramirez listened patiently. "And you feel this might be connected to your past?" "Yes," I said, the word a small exhale. "My mother, Evelyn. She was very critical, especially about my appearance and my achievements. Nothing was ever quite good enough. She'd say things like, 'Are you really going to wear that?' Or compare me to friends or even strangers. 'Oh, Melissa is doing so well in school, isn't she?' Always with this tone that implied I wasn't. Or she'd comment on my weight, even when I was a perfectly normal size, just constant scrutiny, like I was a project she needed to fix." The words tumbled out faster now, and if I wasn't performing or if I disappointed her in some way, she could be cold, distant, or she'd get this look, this sigh, that made me feel like the biggest burden in the world, like I was inherently flawed. I learned to be very careful, very agreeable, to anticipate what she wanted and try to be that, to avoid conflict at all costs. Dr. Ramirez nodded slowly. "That sounds like a very difficult environment to grow up in, when a child's sense of worth is constantly tied to meeting a parent's often shifting or impossible standards, and when perceived failure or independent thought is met with criticism or withdrawal, it can deeply impact their fundamental sense of safety and security in relationships. When a child's sense of worth is constantly tied to meeting a parent's often shifting or impossible standards, and when perceived failure or independent thought is met with criticism or withdrawal, it can deeply impact their fundamental sense of safety and security." The words resonated. I felt neither, not truly, not deep down. "It's like I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop," I explained, trying to articulate the constant low-level anxiety. Waiting for the moment when someone sees the real me, the flawed, not good enough version my mother saw, and leaves. So I try to be perfect, but it's exhausting. And when something happens that triggers that fear, like Caleb cancelling, it feels like confirmation that the voice in my head is right, that I'm not important enough. "You learned that love and acceptance were conditional," Dr. Ramirez said gently, "and that your value was tied to external factors, how you looked, what you achieved, how agreeable you were. That's a heavy burden for a child, and those patterns, those beliefs get deeply ingrained. They become the lens through which you view new relationships." Tears pricked at my eyes. It felt so validating to hear it put into words by someone else. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just my fault for being too sensitive. This was a consequence. A painful, debilitating consequence of years of emotional chipping away. So, when Caleb cancels, Dr. Ramirez continued, even though logically you know it's work, emotionally it triggers that old wound. It feels like I'm not a priority, which echoes the feeling of not being enough or important enough to your mother. Yes, exactly. It was like a direct line from a cancelled dinner in Portland to a little girl trying desperately to earn a smile from her mother. The connection was clear and terrifying. We can work on this, Maya, Dr. Ramirez said. We can explore those core beliefs, understand their origin, and build new pathways. Learn to tolerate discomfort, challenge the negative self-talk, and build a stronger sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation or avoiding conflict. It's not a quick fix, but it's absolutely possible to heal and build healthier relationships. I left her office feeling drained, but also a flicker of hope. The rain had stopped. A weak sun was trying to break through the clouds over the West Hills. Healing. It sounded like a long, difficult journey, but for the first time, I felt like I had a map and a guide. The next few weeks were a mix of small victories and frustrating setbacks. Therapy sessions with Dr. Ramirez were intense. We talked about specific incidents from my childhood, fragmented memories that surfaced like painful shards. My 10th birthday, when my mother commented on my chubby cheeks right before I blew out the candles. A time I got a B+ instead of an A, and she sighed, "Well, that's disappointing, isn't it? You could have done better." Overhearing her on the phone with a friend, talking about how difficult I was being. These weren't dramatic, scream-filled fights. They were quieter, more insidious. Constant, low-level invalidation that eroded my confidence brick by brick. Dr. Ramirez called it emotional neglect and conditional regard. It felt accurate. I was regarded, but only if I met certain, often unspoken conditions. Applying what I learned outside of therapy was the hard part. Caleb and I were navigating things, but my anxiety was a constant third wheel. If he didn't text back immediately, my mind would race. He's pulling away. He's bored. I said something wrong. I'd practiced the techniques Dr. Ramirez taught me. Deep breathing. Challenging the thought. Is there actual evidence he's bored, or is this my fear talking? Grounding myself in the present. I am sitting on my couch in Portland. The rain is falling. Caleb is probably just in a meeting. It helped sometimes. Other times, the fear was a tidal wave. Communication with Caleb was a minefield. How much do I tell him? How do I explain that a simple, delayed text can feel like a personal attack without sounding completely irrational? Dr. Ramirez advised honesty, but gradual. Share what feels safe. Explain the impact of certain things without necessarily dumping the full weight of my trauma on him at once. One evening we were talking about our families. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. My mom and I, we have a complicated relationship, I started, choosing my words carefully. We were at his apartment in the Pearl District, the city lights twinkling outside his big window. It felt safe, cozy, but also exposed. She was very focused on perfection, and criticism was her main tool. It made it hard to feel unconditionally accepted. Caleb listened, his expression open and kind. "That sounds tough, Maya." "Yeah," I admitted, a little relieved by his simple, non-judgmental response. It's weird because she wasn't like overtly abusive. No yelling or hitting. It was more subtle. The constant comments, the comparisons, the feeling that I was always falling short. It made me really afraid of disappointing people, and really sensitive to criticism, even when it's not intended. I took a deep breath. This was a small step, but it felt huge. Sometimes that makes me overreact to things. Like, if I feel like I've messed up, or if someone seems upset with me, my brain goes straight to I'm fundamentally bad and they're going to leave. Caleb reached across the couch and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and steady. "Thank you for telling me that, Maya. I sometimes don't understand why you pull away, or why something small seems to upset you so much. It helps to know there's a reason." "It's not you," I said quickly, needing him to understand that. "It's the old stuff. My brain is wired to expect rejection. I'm working on it." He squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you are. And I'm here. I want to understand. Just try to talk to me, okay? Even if it's hard. Don't just shut down." It was a fair request, and a difficult one. Shutting down was my default setting. It was safer than exposing the raw, vulnerable fear underneath. But seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, the willingness to try and meet me where I was, it chipped away at the walls I had built. There was an incident a week later that tested this new fragile understanding. We were planning a weekend trip to the coast. I was excited, but also anxious. Trips meant extended, unavoidable time together, potential for more triggers. I'd meticulously planned everything, double-checked reservations, packed carefully, my old need for control and perfection kicking in. Caleb, being more laid back, hadn't confirmed the restaurant reservation for Saturday night. It was a popular spot in Cannon Beach. I saw it was fully booked online. Panic flared. "Caleb," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. We were packing at my place. "You didn't book the restaurant? It's full now." He looked surprised, then apologetic. "Oh man, I totally spaced. I thought I had more time. I'm really sorry, Maya." Logically, it was a simple mistake. Annoying, yes, but fixable. Maybe we could find another place or eat earlier. Emotionally, it felt like a punch. He didn't prioritize this. He doesn't care about the details, about the effort I put in. He's careless with my plans, just like... A fragmented image flashed in my mind. My mother impatiently waving away a drawing I was proud of. Yes, Maya, very nice. Now go clean your room." Dismissal. Carelessness with something I valued. My breath hitched. I felt the familiar urge to withdraw, to get cold, to punish him with silence or passive aggression. "See? He's going to disappoint you, just like everyone else." But then I heard Dr. Ramirez's voice in my head. Challenge the thought, is he being careless with you, or did he just forget to make a reservation? Separate the action from the old wound. It was hard, so hard. My body was tensing up, ready for conflict or withdrawal. My voice was tight when I spoke. It's okay, I managed, though it wasn't. It makes me anxious when plans fall apart. I guess I get really invested in things going perfectly. Caleb looked at me, sensing the shift, the tension radiating from me. He didn't get defensive. He didn't dismiss my feelings. "Hey," he said softly, stepping closer. "I messed up. I'm genuinely sorry I forgot. We'll find somewhere else. Or we can grab takeout and eat on the beach. It'll still be great. And I know that things falling apart can be hard for you. I didn't mean to cause that." He remembered. He remembered what I had told him about my anxiety around things going perfectly. He wasn't just apologizing for the reservation. He was apologizing for triggering my fear. It wasn't a magical fix. The knot in my stomach didn't vanish instantly. But his understanding, his empathy, was like a warm compress on a bruise. It didn't erase the pain, but it soothed it. "Okay," I said, a little more genuinely this time. "Okay, beach takeout sounds actually really nice." It was a small moment, a tiny victory against years of ingrained fear. I hadn't spiraled completely. I hadn't shut down. I had felt the trigger, felt the old wound ache, but I had also used the tools I was learning. And I had communicated, however imperfectly, and been met with kindness instead of criticism. The journey was long, but maybe, just maybe, I wasn't destined to walk it alone, or to let my past dictate my future entirely. The coastal trip ended up being wonderful. We found a charming little seafood shack, ate fish and chips wrapped in paper on a driftwood log overlooking the choppy grey Pacific. The air smelled of salt and pine. It wasn't the planned fancy dinner, but it was real and relaxed and good. I felt moments of genuine peace, moments where the anxiety receded and I could just be with Caleb, enjoying the sound of the waves and the feeling of his arm around my shoulders. But the triggers were always lurking. A casual comment from Caleb about a past relationship, a moment where he seemed distracted by his phone. My brain would immediately jump to conclusions, twisting innocent actions into evidence of impending abandonment. Dr. Ramirez called it catastrophizing, a common response to trauma. My brain was so used to anticipating the worst that it actively looked for proof. Therapy continued to be my anchor. We delved deeper into the roots of my people-pleasing and my fear of conflict. It stemmed from my mother's unpredictable reactions. Sometimes she was fine. Sometimes a switch flipped, and I was walking on eggshells. The safest strategy was to be invisible, agreeable, and anticipate her needs before she even voiced them. This translated into adult relationships as a desperate need to keep everyone happy, to avoid expressing my own needs or opinions if they might cause friction, and to feel personally responsible for other people's moods. You learned that your value depended on your ability to manage her emotions and avoid triggering her criticism, Dr. Ramirez explained. That's an impossible task for a child, and it teaches you that your own feelings and needs are secondary or even dangerous. We practiced setting boundaries in session, small hypothetical scenarios, saying no to an unreasonable request, expressing disagreement gently. It felt incredibly awkward, like speaking a foreign language. The physical sensations were intense, chest tightening, palms sweating, voice catching. My body was screaming, "Danger! Avoid conflict." One of the hardest things was navigating my relationship with my mother, Evelyn. We spoke on the phone every week or two. Each call was an exercise in managing my own anxiety. She hadn't changed. The subtle criticisms were still there, woven into seemingly normal conversation. "Oh, Maya, are you still working at that same place? I thought you'd be looking for something more by now. Have you done something different with your hair? It looks a little flat. Your cousin Emily is getting married. Such a lovely traditional wedding. Of course, she's always been such a natural beauty." Each comment was a tiny pinprick. Individually, they sounded almost innocent. String them together over decades, and they formed a pattern of relentless undermining. I tried applying my new boundary-setting skills, starting small. Instead of immediately trying to justify my job choice or apologize for my hair, I'd just say, "I'm happy with my job right now, Mom," or "I like my hair this way." It felt rebellious and terrifying. Her reaction wasn't explosive, just a subtle shift in tone, a slight coolness, a quick change of subject that implied I'd shut down a perfectly valid conversation. It was the passive-aggressive response I knew so well. It still triggered a flicker of guilt and anxiety, but it also felt empowering. I hadn't caved. I hadn't scrambled to make her happy. I had stated my truth, calmly. Caleb continued to be patient, mostly. There were times when my anxiety or withdrawal was hard for him to deal with. He'd get frustrated, confused. "Maya, what's wrong? You just completely shut down. I don't know what I did." In those moments, it was a struggle not to retreat entirely, but I would try, stumbling over the words, to explain. "It's not you. It's just, I feel like I messed up and I'm afraid you're angry and my go-to is just to disappear." He learned to give me space when I needed it, but also to gently encourage me to talk. He read some articles about attachment styles I sent him, trying to understand. His effort meant the world to me. It was the opposite of the carelessness I had learned to expect, but the deep-seated fear remained. Could I ever truly trust anyone? Could I ever believe that I was worthy of love and belonging, just as I was, flaws and all? The voice of my mother, internalized, was a powerful adversary. "You're too much. You're not enough." One evening we were having dinner at my apartment. Everything was lovely. We were laughing, the conversation easy. Then Caleb made a comment about a mutual friend who had recently gone through a tough breakup due to trust issues. "It must be exhausting, constantly doubting someone," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Like, if you can't trust the person you're with, what do you even have?" His words were innocent, directed at the friend's situation. But they landed on me like a blow. If you can't trust... My own lack of trust, my constant vigilance felt exposed, shameful. Did he see me that way? Did he see how much I struggled, how often I doubted him, not because of anything he did, but because of my own broken wiring? My carefully constructed composure shattered. My smile froze, my chest tightened harder than it had in weeks. The room felt like it was spinning slightly. I couldn't breathe properly. This was it. He saw it. He saw the damaged part of me, and he was judging it. He was realizing that dating me with all my baggage was too exhausting. He was going to leave. I stood up abruptly, scraping my chair back. "Excuse me," I mumbled and practically ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Leaning against the cool tile, I gasped for air. My hands were shaking. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a full-blown panic attack, triggered by a single, innocuous sentence that my trauma-wired brain had twisted into a direct indictment of my deepest fear. "He knows. He sees you can't trust. He thinks you're exhausting. He's going to leave." The voice was loud, relentless. It was my mother's voice, amplified by years of internalization, telling me I was fundamentally unlovable because I wasn't perfect, wasn't easy. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to ground myself. This is a trauma response, I told myself, repeating Dr. Ramirez's words. This is not reality. He was talking about someone else. He wasn't judging you. But the feeling was overwhelming. The fear of abandonment was so visceral it felt like a physical pain. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying the breathing exercises. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. My breath hitched, ragged. Outside the door I heard Caleb's voice, soft, concerned. "Maya? Are you okay? What happened?" His concern only made it worse. He was being kind now, but soon he would see the too much and his kindness would turn to frustration, then to absence. That was the pattern I had learned. I'm fine, I choked out, the lie feeling thick and heavy, just not feeling well. Silence from outside. Then, okay, I'll be out here. Take your time. His patience was another challenge. It didn't fit the script my brain was running. The script where kindness was a temporary state before the inevitable disappointment and rejection. His willingness to wait, to not push, felt both comforting and deeply unsettling. After what felt like an eternity, the shaking subsided slightly. The intense wave of panic receded, leaving behind a dull ache of shame and exhaustion. I splashed cold water on my face, looked at my pale, drawn reflection in the mirror. How could I possibly explain this? How could I articulate that his simple comment had unlocked a vault of childhood terror? I unlocked the door and stepped out. Caleb was sitting on the couch, looking worried. He didn't look angry. He looked genuinely concerned. "Hey," he said softly, "are you sure you're okay?" I walked over and sat down opposite him, avoiding his gaze. My voice was barely a whisper. "No, I'm not okay. I'm really sorry, Caleb. That was a lot." He waited, didn't pressure me. "When you said about the trust issues," I started, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. It triggered something really badly. It made me feel like you see how messed up I am, how hard I struggle with trusting, and that you'll realize it's too much and you'll leave. I finally looked up, meeting his eyes. The vulnerability felt terrifying, like standing naked in front of him. My mother, she always made me feel like I was fundamentally flawed, like I was never quite right, and that if I wasn't perfect, I was disposable. So anytime I feel like I'm failing, or like I'm hard to deal with, that old fear just takes over. It tells me I'm about to be abandoned. The words were out, raw and messy. I braced myself for his reaction. Criticism? Frustration? The quiet withdrawal that spoke louder than words? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. He didn't look away. His expression was one of deep sadness and something else. Understanding? "Maya," he said, his voice gentle, "I am so sorry that happened to you, that your mother made you feel that way." He paused, choosing his words carefully, and I'm sorry my comment triggered that. I wasn't thinking about you at all when I said it. I was just reflecting on something else. It had nothing to do with you or us. He reached out and took my hands again, holding them firmly. "And Maya, you are not too much. You are not disposable. And you are absolutely not messed up. You are a kind, wonderful, beautiful person who went through something really difficult as a kid, and you're dealing with the fallout. That's not a flaw. That's just the reality of trauma." Tears streamed down my face now, not from panic, but from the sheer overwhelming relief of being seen and accepted in that moment of raw vulnerability. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He held my hands and looked at me with compassion. "Your struggle with trust, it makes sense," he continued, his thumb gently stroking my hand. "Given what you went through, it's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of how you were treated, and I want to be here for you. I know I can't fix it. That's your work to do. But I can be here. I can be steady. I can try to understand." He smiled faintly. "And I promise you, Maya, I'm not leaving. Not because you're too much, but because I care about you. A lot." It wasn't a magic cure. The fear wouldn't vanish overnight. But in that moment, sitting in my living room in Portland, holding Caleb's hands, I felt a tiny shift. The heavy stone in my gut felt a fraction lighter. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to constantly brace for impact, that maybe there were people who wouldn't replicate the patterns of my past felt real. It was terrifyingly hopeful. He started to recognize my triggers, not perfectly, but he tried. If I went quiet after a confusing text, he'd follow up with a quick call or a clarifying message. If I seemed anxious about a plan, he'd offer reassurance. He was patient when I struggled to articulate my feelings, giving me space but staying present. And I, in turn, worked harder in therapy. The vulnerability I had shown Caleb felt like a point of no return, in a good way. It was out in the open now. I couldn't pretend anymore that my reactions were normal dating anxiety. They were rooted in trauma, and I had to own that and work through it. Dr. Ramirez and I focused on building my distress tolerance and challenging my core beliefs. We explored the idea that my mother's criticism wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of her own issues, her own insecurities, perhaps passed down through her own family history. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me start to detach my identity from her judgment. Her criticism is about her, not about me. It was a simple sentence, but revolutionary. We also worked on setting firmer boundaries with Evelyn. This was perhaps the most challenging aspect. My entire life I had been trained to accommodate her, to seek her approval, to avoid her displeasure. The thought of intentionally doing something that might upset her felt like a betrayal of that ingrained programming. Think of it as protecting your inner child, Maya. Dr. Ramirez suggested during one session, the little girl who was constantly hurt and criticized. You are an adult now, and you have the power to create a safe space for yourself, free from that constant chipping away. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. It's showing yourself that you matter. I started small. When my mother called and immediately launched into a critical comment about something trivial, I would interrupt gently. Mom, I'm not going to discuss my weight/hair job with you right now. The first few times my heart pounded, my palms got sweaty, I braced for her reaction. It was always the same, a startled pause, a huffy sigh, a wounded tone. Well, fine, I was just trying to help. You're so sensitive. Then a quick pivot to another topic, leaving me feeling shaky but also strong. I had done it. I had prioritized my own emotional safety over her comfort or approval. One particularly difficult call happened a few weeks later. Evelyn was visiting her sister in Seattle and suggested driving down to Portland for the day. We could have lunch, she said, making it sound like a royal command. My immediate ingrained response was to say yes, people please. Avoid conflict. But the thought of a whole afternoon under her scrutiny, feeling that familiar tension and anxiety, made me feel physically ill. I took a deep breath, gripping my phone. Mom, I actually can't do lunch this weekend. I have plans. It wasn't entirely true. I had plans, but they were flexible. But it was a boundary, a beat of silence. Plans? What plans? You didn't mention any plans. The tone was sharp, accusatory. Just plans, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm busy this weekend. Oh, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment and thinly veiled disapproval. Well, that's too bad. I was hoping to see you. It's been a while. Guilt flared, hot and sharp. You're disappointing her. You're being difficult. You're a bad daughter. The old voices were loud. But I held firm. I'm sorry, Mom. Maybe another time. Yes, perhaps, she said coolly. The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me trembling, but also, again, with that quiet sense of empowerment. It was incredibly hard, but necessary. It was like telling that little girl inside me, it's okay. You don't have to earn her love. You can protect yourself now. Liam was my rock during this time. He listened without judgment, offered practical advice. Just hang up if she's being abusive, Maya. You don't have to stay on the phone. And celebrated my small victories. He reminded me that healing wasn't linear, that setbacks were normal, and that the fact I was doing this work at all was incredibly brave. My relationship with Caleb deepened. The panicky moments didn't disappear entirely, but they became less frequent, less intense. And crucially, I got better at talking about them. Instead of running to the bathroom, I could sometimes say, hey, what you just said triggered some old stuff for me. Can we talk about it? He learned to be a safe space for those conversations. He didn't try to fix me, but he offered empathy and patience. He saw the struggle, and he chose to stay. That in itself was healing. It challenged the core belief that I was unlovable once my flaws were visible. But the biggest test was yet to come. It involved a situation that mirrored the kind of subtle manipulation I had experienced my whole life, and it would force me to choose definitively between the old patterns and the new path I was forging. It happened during a weekend getaway Caleb and I took to the Oregon coast again. this time staying in a small cabin near seaside. The air was crisp, the ocean roared, and for the first time in a long time I felt a sense of genuine peace. We walked on the beach, cooked simple meals, and just enjoyed being together without the pressures of city life or the constant hum of my anxiety. Then, on Saturday morning, Caleb got a call. It was from his sister, Sarah. They were close, and I liked her. But the conversation seemed to go on for a long time, and Caleb's expression shifted from relaxed to concerned. When he hung up, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. That was Sarah. She's having a really tough time. Her car broke down miles from home, she's stranded, and she's got a really important interview tomorrow morning she can't miss. She's really stressed out. Oh no, that's awful, I said, genuinely sympathetic. Is there anything she can do? Well, Caleb hesitated, looking at me. She asked if I could drive down and get her. It's about a 3-hour drive each way, plus picking her up. It would mean leaving now, and I wouldn't be back until late tonight. It would pretty much wipe out the rest of our weekend here. My stomach dropped. The peace I had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a familiar, cold dread. Wipe out the weekend. Leave now. My brain immediately went into overdrive. He's choosing her over you. Your time together isn't important enough. You're easily set aside when someone else needs him. It was the cancelled date trigger, amplified. This wasn't just a dinner. This was our precious weekend getaway. The stakes felt higher. Caleb was looking at me, his expression hesitant, apologetic. I told her I'd call her back. I know this is our weekend. I didn't want to just say yes without talking to you. But she really is in a bind. He was being considerate. He was including me in the decision. He wasn't just leaving. Logically, I knew this. But the emotional part of me, the wounded part, was screaming. He wants to go. He wants to choose her. Your feelings don't matter as much as her emergency. This was it. The moment where my learned patterns collided head-on with the possibility of a healthy relationship. The old Maya would immediately say, "Oh, of course, go help your sister. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." I would sacrifice my own feelings, my own disappointment, to be the good, agreeable girlfriend. I would bury the resentment that would inevitably fester later. I would make myself small and unimportant to avoid conflict and ensure I wasn't perceived as difficult or selfish. But the new Maya, the one who had been painstakingly learning to value her own needs and set boundaries, hesitated. The thought of saying, "Go, it's fine," felt like a betrayal of myself. It felt like silencing the little girl who was always told her feelings didn't matter. I looked at Caleb, at his kind, worried face. He wasn't Evelyn. He wasn't demanding or critical. He was asking. He was giving me a choice. My heart was pounding. My voice felt shaky, but I forced the words out. This was the boundary. This was the moment I had practiced in therapy. "Caleb," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I understand that Sarah needs help, and I know you want to be there for her. But I'm really disappointed. We planned this weekend. I was really looking forward to this time with you, and having it cut short like this, it really hurts." It was incredibly hard to admit that, to voice my disappointment, my hurt, instead of burying it under a facade of agreeableness. It felt selfish. It felt dangerous. I braced myself for his reaction. Would he see me as difficult? Selfish? Would he get angry? Caleb's eyebrows furrowed slightly, not in anger but in concern. He didn't immediately jump to defend himself or minimize my feelings. He just listened. "It triggers my fear of not being a priority," I continued, pushing through the discomfort, "of being easily set aside. I know that's old stuff, and I know you're not trying to do that. But that's how it feels right now, and it's hard." I took a shaky breath. "So, I understand you need to go help her, but I need you to understand that this is hard for me, and I don't want to just pretend it's fine when it's not." The cabin was silent, except for the distant roar of the ocean. Caleb looked at me, his gaze steady and understanding. He didn't get defensive. He didn't say, "It's just my sister, you're being unreasonable." He heard me. "Maya," he said softly. "Thank you for telling me that. Thank you for being honest, even though it was hard. I do understand, and I never ever want you to feel like you're not a priority, because you are." He squeezed my hands. "Your feelings absolutely matter, and you're right, this sucks. I'm disappointed too that our weekend is getting cut short, But you being able to tell me how you feel instead of just saying it's fine, that means a lot to me. It shows me you trust me enough to be real with me." He paused, thinking. "Okay, here's what we can do. I'll go get Sarah. I'll drive straight there and straight back. I'll text you when I'm on my way back so you know when to expect me. It will be late, probably after dinner, but I'll be back tonight. And tomorrow is still our day. We can make the most of it. How does that sound?" It wasn't perfect. It still meant losing most of the day. But his response, it was everything I had hoped for, everything I had been working towards. He validated my feelings, acknowledged my pain, reassured me, and found a compromise that respected both his sister's need and my need to feel prioritized and heard. It was the opposite of my past. It was healthy. It was love that wasn't conditional on my agreeableness. The decision made, a different kind of peace settled over me, one earned through vulnerability and courage. Caleb called Sarah back, arranged the pickup, and within the hour, he was gone. The cabin feeling suddenly quiet and vast. The old voices tried to creep back in. He's relieved to get away. He's thinking about how much easier it would be if you weren't so complicated. But I recognized them now. I didn't just accept them as truth. I challenged them. He chose to talk to me. He validated my feelings. He said I'm a priority. This feeling is the old fear, not the present reality. I spent the day alone in the cabin. Instead of spiraling, I practiced self-compassion. I acknowledged my disappointment and sadness about the interrupted weekend without judgment. I sat by the window, watched the waves, read a book, listened to music. I allowed myself to feel the feelings without letting them consume me. It was still hard, moments of anxiety flickering, but it was manageable. It was progress. Caleb texted me updates on his drive, simple things. Just past Tillamook, making good time. Got Sarah, heading back now. Each text was a small reassurance, a thread connecting us across the miles, a quiet confirmation that he was coming back, that he hadn't forgotten about me. He got back late, long after dark. I was reading on the couch, the cabin warm and cozy. When he walked in, looking tired but relieved, he didn't just say, "I'm back." He came over to the couch, sat down, and pulled me into a hug. "Hey," he murmured, holding me close. "I'm sorry again about today. Thank you for being so understanding, and for telling me how you felt. That was really important." I hugged him back, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for listening," I said, my voice muffled against his shirt, "and for coming back." He pulled back slightly, smiling. Always. The next day, our shortened Sunday, felt incredibly precious. We had breakfast together, walked on the beach again, explored a small tide pool. There was an ease between us, a deeper connection forged by navigating a difficult moment with honesty and empathy. The anxiety wasn't gone forever, I knew that. Healing wasn't a destination, but a continuous process. There would be other triggers, other moments where the old fears surfaced. But now I had tools, I had awareness, and I had a partner who was willing to stand with me in the difficult moments, who didn't run from my vulnerability, but met it with kindness. My relationship with my mother remained challenging. I continued to practice setting boundaries, sometimes successfully, sometimes faltering. The guilt still surfaced, but it was less debilitating. I was slowly accepting that I couldn't change her, but I could change how I reacted to her and how much power I gave her over my emotional state. I wasn't responsible for managing her feelings or seeking her approval anymore. My primary responsibility was to myself, to the person I was becoming. One afternoon, I was talking to Liam, telling him about the weekend, the trigger with Caleb, and how we navigated it. "That's huge, Maya," he said, his voice full of genuine warmth. We were sitting outside a coffee shop on Hawthorne Boulevard, the Portland buzz around us. "You didn't shut down. You didn't people-please. You voiced your needs and your feelings, even when it was terrifying." And Caleb responded with empathy. That's what healthy relationships look like. It's not about never having problems. It's about how you work through them. It was hard, I admitted, stirring my tea. Every fibre of my being wanted to just say, "It's fine," and stuff it down. "I know," he said gently, "but you didn't. That's the work, Maya. That's the healing. You're breaking the cycle. You're showing yourself that you are worthy of being heard, of having needs, of taking up space. Your value isn't tied to being small or agreeable." His words landed softly, resonating deep within me. worthy of being heard, worthy of having needs. The opposite of everything I had been taught. I thought about the little girl who hid her drawings, who apologized for getting a B+, who walked on eggshells. I couldn't go back and save her, but I could heal her now by choosing a different path for the woman I was today. The path wasn't easy. It was filled with moments of doubt, anxiety, and the lingering shadows of the past. But it was also filled with moments of connection, understanding, and a growing sense of my own strength. I was learning to trust, not just Caleb, but myself. Learning that my emotions were valid, my needs were important, and that I was, finally, enough. Just as I was. The rain started again, a soft drizzle typical of Portland. I didn't feel isolated this time. I felt grounded. I had faced a fear, chosen courage over comfort, and found that the world didn't end. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. The journey of building a life and relationships based on truth and self-worth. The process of healing didn't follow a neat timeline. Some days felt like giant leaps forward. Others felt like stumbling backward into old patterns. There were times I'd still catch myself people-pleasing, agreeing to something I didn't want to do, only to feel that familiar resentment curdle inside me later. Or a small comment from Caleb, made without any ill intent, would still prickle, triggering a moment of doubt or defensiveness before I could catch myself. But the difference now was awareness. I could identify the trigger, recognize the old voice, and choose a different response, even if it was just taking a moment to breathe before reacting. I was building a pause between the stimulus and the reaction, a small space where choice existed. My therapy sessions with Dr. Ramirez continued to be invaluable. We explored the concept of reparenting myself, giving myself the validation, acceptance, and unconditional love that I hadn't received as a child. It sounded strange at first, but it manifested in small acts. Acknowledging my feelings without judgment, celebrating small accomplishments, allowing myself rest when I was tired, speaking kindly to myself in my internal monologue. Setting boundaries with my mother remained the most challenging aspect, a constant test of my progress. Every phone call required mental preparation. I learned to keep them shorter, to steer the conversation away from sensitive topics, and to end the call if I felt myself getting overwhelmed or criticized. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting my own peace. Sometimes the guilt would still wash over me after setting a boundary. She's my mother. Shouldn't I just try harder to make her happy? But then I would remember the cost of that. The erosion of my self-worth, the constant anxiety, the inability to form healthy connections. The cost was too high. My healing, my well-being, had to be the priority. Caleb and I continued to navigate the complexities of my journey together. He wasn't perfect. Sometimes he'd get frustrated or not understand the depth of my reactions, but he always came back to patience and a willingness to listen when I could explain. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale, free of conflict. It was real, messy, and required effort from both of us, but it was built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, which felt incredibly strong. He started therapy himself, not because of me, but to work through some of his own past experiences. It wasn't something I had asked for, but his willingness to do his own personal work deepened my respect and love for him. We were two imperfect people, trying our best to be healthy and build something good together. There was one final interaction